All right, friends of Project Genotype, of course, we've been talking about pregnancy and births and babies, and of course, it would be negligent of me if we didn't get to the fundamental cause of these things, which is, of course, sexual intercourse, or what we call sex.
I have a feeling this is going to be extremely awkward.
Mr. Coexistence.
Sex is a funny word because it sometimes means your gender, and it sometimes means of act of making babies. It sometimes means a lot of things, and I think that's part of the issue we have in humanity is not everybody agrees on what it means. So yeah, reproduction, sexual reproduction. We, as human beings, we are sexually reproductive, and like a lot of our closest ancestors, sex and sexual attraction and intimacy and those kinds of things are a part of the social fabric as well. And I'm not going to ignore that. Okay, I'm not a counselor, and this isn't really a health class, but it's important to understand that the acts of baby making are also associated with other things besides just having babies. Okay, and that's what makes our species interesting. And yeah, there are a lot of secondary effects of sex or the desire to have sex.
I don't know about you, but I'm extremely embarrassed right now. Thanks a lot.
Okay, and I think in this day and age, most of us understand that some people, when they talk about sex, are talking about whether or not you make sperm or egg, and some people are talking about what types of other folks you're interested in or how you identify. And it's so convoluted because if you think about it, we should really just have people, and then some make sperm, some make eggs, and everything else is just secondary. You know what I mean? But we're getting there, but unfortunately it's not. So I think today, and then of course as a youth, as an adolescent, you've reached puberty, and so now you probably are somewhat confused with your own identity, or maybe you're not confused with your identity, or maybe you're confused with what you're supposed to do versus what you have to do, but what you're expected to do, and all these things. We call that in the fun business of middle school peer pressure, and I can't give you any answers of how to get rid of that, but it's going to happen. But I can give you some advice and maybe some good information right now. So remember, in every relationship, right, there's two sides, and I think where we have problems, especially amongst adolescents, is if the purpose of the relationship is the emotional purpose doesn't match. Okay, and that's true especially when it comes to reproduction and having sex. If the reason for you wanting to have sex with another person doesn't match their reason, that can lead to a lot of heartbreak and upset and bad feelings and really just terrible emotional distress. So one thing I think I would recommend to you, first of all, is always be sure you know as you go through where your friends are emotionally when you're talking about pretty big life events. Okay. Now, I'm not going to ignore the fact that a lot of people have sex but do not want to have babies. Okay, and that's part of it, the social part of it. And so there are ways, we call these contraceptive devices or birth control devices. And I'm not going to explain all of them. You'll get that in health class, but I'm going to explain the general way that they work anyway for you.
Exactly as I thought. This is extremely awkward.
Yeah, all birth control devices, all reproductive control devices are there to prevent sperm from meeting eggs. So if you remember, the egg's made here, sperm are released or ejaculated here, and they have to meet. All right, so there's some easy ways. There's a whole bunch of products you can buy in the drugstore that either cover the penis or cover the cervix to actually make a barrier so that sperm can't make it to the egg. They can't get out of the vagina. They just, we can't get out, right? Like, and so they'll never meet the egg. There are other products which go into the uterus. Okay, we usually call these intrauterine devices, and they come in various ways, which if an egg is fertilized, when it gets to the uterus, because this thing is there, it can't stick. So you can have fertilization, but no pregnancy. And then there are a lot of products that are hormonal control or chemical control, and these are actually chemical control of the egg maker, of making eggs. So things like there are injections and there are patches but they're hormonal patches, and they work with two hormones, progesterone and estrogen, to control when the egg is made. And the idea is to repress egg making. In the case of like the birth control pills usually allow for egg making once a month, but it changes the timing so that you make your egg at the exact same time you're going to have your period. So even if the egg gets fertilized, it's not going to stick because everything is leaving. Okay. They work by manipulating the hormones that control egg production and egg releasing, really. And yeah, that's burdens on the egg maker, right? As far as I know, there aren't a lot of products out there that control the production of sperm cells, right? It seems a little unfair, but yeah, I guess it kind of makes sense. You're only making one egg at a time, maybe. All right.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe we're talking about this. Oh no.
There are some permanent usually people go with permanent birth control if they are 100% done with having children. So this is usually if people are older or if there's some other complication where they shouldn't have to, but they still want to have sexual intercourse. And like for egg makers, a pretty common practice is called tubal ligation, although it's a fairly it's a surgery. You got to go into the abdomen. What they basically do is just cut out a section of the uterine tube and then tie off both ends. So you still make eggs still travel, but that's as far as they get, is right there. Sperm can enter, but that's as far as they get. So sperm and egg will never meet. Tubal ligation, or they might say, I got my tubes tied. Right? There's a much easier procedure for men or for sperm makers called vasectomy, right? It is not neutering or castration, but this can be done as an outpatient right in the office. And it's the same idea. You cut the vas deferens, the tube, right? So you still make sperm, you're still manly, you still make all that testosterone or whatever, but the sperm can only get this far, right? And that's not that different because sperm usually are stored here in the epididymis and they only last for a few days, right? And then they fall apart anyway. So even if they only get this far, it's not really changing anything about you. You still make semen, so you can still have sex, but there's no sperm. Okay? And of course, I'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about other health issues too, because, it's important to realize that sexuality is a part of humanity, a part of our life. If you get to puberty, you are ready to make offspring, so you're sexually reproductive, but all of the choices come down to you. So if you're sexually healthy, not only do you understand that, but you also understand all of the things, risk factors and also benefits. Romantic relationships can be awesome. Okay, they don't always have to involve sex. Sexual relationships can also be awesome. Right? One thing though that you do need to always keep in mind is that because you are so close together, that it's a perfect place for infections to occur. In fact, they might be the most common infections in humanity are what we call sexually transmitted diseases, right? If you think about it, that's closer than pretty much two people will ever get, and there's definitely exchange of bodily fluids. All right, some sexually transmitted diseases are just parasitic. Like these are all parasitic bacteria, right? Chlamydia being probably the number one. I saw an amazing stat that in Clinton County, chlamydia infections are humongous, are very high. So they do very well. The beauty of these is that they're treatable with antibiotics because it's just like getting a strep throat. just in your private parts. Okay? There are some, though, that are what we call viral. You can never cure a virus. You can only contain it. And we've talked about how viruses work. Probably the most common is HPV, although it's really cool. Most of you now can get or have been vaccinated against HPV and hepatitis. So that's cool. Okay. The problem with STDs, of course, is that the symptoms, you won't know you have one until usually quite a bit after you've had sex. So I guess why they're so successful is because they hang out there. There's a better chance for them to pass because you might have more partners, maybe. I mean, it makes sense in terms of natural selection. Okay, so how do you prevent them? Number one is you just are smart about it. I'm not gonna go through all of these things. I will tell you that of birth control methods, the condom is probably the best preventative. In fact, that's probably what you should be using at all times, even if you use another birth control method, because not only will it help reduce the chances of pregnancy, but anything that blocks the transmission of fluids like semen is going to reduce the chance of getting an infection for sure. Well, that was fun, wasn't it, folks?
I don't know about you, but I'm extremely embarrassed right now. Thanks a lot.
I mean, there's lots of more questions I have, and that's why you have, and I have too, but that's why we give you health class over and over and over again. But hopefully you got the fundamentals of how babies are made, and you are more wise at the time than you were before this lesson.